The microchip registry listed a different owner, and my dog no longer came up under my name. The notice arrived as a generic confirmation email, thanking me for updating records and reminding me to keep contact information current. I closed it and clipped the leash back onto the hook by the door. He entered my life kneeling on the sidewalk. I was juggling keys and a coffee when my dog lunged toward a dropped sandwich wrapper. The leash slipped from my fingers. He caught it mid-run, bracing his foot against the curb so she didn't pull free. He waited until she settled, then handed the leash back without comment, keeping his hand low so she could sniff first. He asked her name. He asked if she'd had training. He didn't ask mine. He showed up again the next morning, already crouched near the same patch of sidewalk, fixing a broken fence staple that had been catching leashes. He said he walked dogs for neighbors when he had time and hated seeing them get hurt. He used my dog's name like he'd known her longer than a day. After that, he was just there. He timed his walks with mine without calling them walks together. He carried water. He noticed when her gait changed slightly on the stairs and suggested a different route. He knew which treats upset her stomach and which calmed her down after fireworks. He brought a small towel in his pocket when it rained and dried her paws before she tracked water into my building. He didn't come inside at first. He waited at the door and talked to me while she drank. When he did step in later, it was to help lift her onto the couch after she'd slipped jumping up. He moved slowly, talking to her, not to me, until she relaxed. We started sharing evenings because it made sense. He cooked food that wouldn't tempt her and set aside scraps she could have. He washed the bowl before refilling it and set it down in the same spot every time. He noticed when I forgot to eat and plated something without asking. He slept over once because she'd been restless all night. He took the floor so she could pace without waking me. In the morning, he'd already brushed her and wiped the drool from the window where she liked to watch birds. He left a note saying she'd eaten half her breakfast and not to worry. I didn't. He learned her routines faster than I realized. He remembered vet dates. He knew which drawer held the medication. When I worked late, he picked her up and sent photos of her asleep on his feet. He said she settled easier when he stayed still. I let him. The first time paperwork came up, it sounded responsible. He said microchip registries were outdated half the time. He said if anything happened, it was better to have two contacts. He sat beside me while I logged in and looked away when I typed. He asked which number I wanted listed first. I put mine. He suggested adding his as secondary just in case. He said it would make reunification faster if she ever got lost. He said he'd handled this for other dogs and it saved days. Clicked yes. The email arrived a week later while he was refilling the water bowl. I glanced at it, saw the confirmation language, and closed it. He smiled at me and said she'd been calmer lately. He said routine mattered. That night, she slept between us, her head on his ankle, her breathing even. In the morning, he left early and texted to say he'd swing by the park later. He added a photo of her looking up at him, ears tilted, trusting. When I opened the registry again out of idle curiosity, my name wasn't there. His was. I didn't tell him about the registry that day. He came by in the afternoon with a new leash he said someone on the block was giving away. It was sturdier than mine, the clasp quieter. He clipped it on without asking and said it would be easier on her neck. She didn't resist. She leaned into his leg like it was familiar. We walked longer than usual. He kept the pace even, stopped before she pulled, waited until she settled before crossing streets. He talked about small things. Which trees dropped sap. Which corner flooded after rain. He knew where she hesitated and adjusted without comment. At the park, he let her off-leash before I did. He didn't look at me. He watched her. He stood in a place that kept her in view and didn't move when other dogs ran past. She came back to him first and sat, waiting. He smiled and rubbed behind her ears once light, then handed the leash back like it was nothing. At home, he filled her bowl and wiped the rim when it dripped. He set her pills out on a folded napkin and asked if she still took them with food. He remembered the dosage. He didn't check. I checked the registry again while he was in the kitchen. Same result. His name. His number. My field empty. I closed the page when I heard the tap turn off. He suggested we update her schedule. He said consistency helped older dogs sleep better. He drew it out on a scrap of paper and slid it toward me. Morning walk. Midday break. Evening feed. He asked which parts one wanted to keep and which he could handle when I was busy. I circled the mornings. He started picking her up on days I worked late. He texted photos with short notes. She ate all her food. She slept through the noise. She waited by the door when he stood up. When I came home, she didn't rush me like before. She watched him until he nodded, then came over. The vet called to confirm an appointment I hadn't made. I told them it must be a mistake. They said they'd spoken to the secondary contact to reschedule. They said everything was set. I forwarded the voicemail to him. He replied that he'd moved it to a quieter day so she wouldn't be stressed. He added that it was better this way. That evening, he stayed. He brushed her slowly, stopping when she shifted, starting again when she leaned back. He talked to her like she understood timelines. He told me she'd been calmer since the routine settled. I didn't argue. When we went to bed, she chose his side of the room. He put his hand on the floor so she could rest her chin there. He fell asleep like that, still like he'd learned how. In the morning, there was a text from the registry thanking the primary owner for keeping records current. I put the phone down and clipped the new leash onto the hook. Fit better there. The clarification came attached to a favor. He mentioned it while wiping her paws after a walk, his back to me, voice even. He said the registry sometimes defaulted to the most responsive contact. He said it didn't erase me. He said it just ensured someone answered quickly if there was a problem. He set the towel down and tested the clasp on the new leash, clicking it twice to be sure. At work, my phone rang with a number I recognized. The groomer confirmed a slot I hadn't booked and asked if the primary contact still preferred the shorter cut. I said I didn't know. She paused and said it was already noted. She said he'd been clear. I forwarded the call log to him. He replied that it was just maintenance and that she'd feel better afterward. He said trust reduced anxiety. He started keeping her overnight on days I worked late. He didn't call them sleepovers. He said it saved her the back and forth. He sent photos that showed her asleep on his rug on his couch, under his table while he worked. When she came home, she smelled like his place. She went straight to her bed and slept. I told myself it meant she felt safe. The vet visit happened without me. I learned because the invoice hit my email with a thank you note addressed to the owner. The notes listed diet adjustments and a new supplement. The pickup instructions named him. When I asked why I hadn't been called, the receptionist said the owner preferred it that way. That night, he measured the supplement carefully and mixed it into her food. He said she'd resisted at first but accepted it when he slowed down. He said patience mattered. He rearranged my kitchen drawer so the meds sat at the front. He labeled the bottle with a marker he kept in his pocket. He moved her bed closer to the window because the light was better there. He said it helped her joints warm up. I didn't move it back. We slept with the door open so she could choose. She chose him. He lay on his side and rested his hand on the floor again, still and low. When she shifted, he adjusted without opening his eyes. In the morning, there was a message from the registry confirming emergency protocols had been updated. It thanked the primary owner for adding a trusted caregiver. My name appeared once under notes. He made coffee and asked if I wanted the early walk or the late one. He said he'd planned around it. I said early. He nodded and clipped the leash on himself. He stopped asking me to come along. Not directly. He phrased it as efficiency. He said shorter walks were better now. He said too many variables made her restless. When I reached for the leash, he said he'd already planned the route. I let my hand fall. The building manager emailed about an incident near the dumpsters. A loose dog had been reported, description matching her coloring. The note said the primary owner had already confirmed details and thanked staff for responding quickly. I read it twice before forwarding it to him. He replied that everything was handled. He said she'd been startled but calm. He said it was good the registry was up to date. At home, he moved her crate. Not far, just closer to the door. He said it reduced stress if she could hear arrivals sooner. He placed a blanket inside that smelled like his detergent. She went in without hesitation and lay down. He began correcting me in small ways. He said not to give treats between meals. He said her water should be refreshed more often. He said my tone was too high when I called her name and showed me how to lower it so she'd settle faster. When I tried his way, she responded immediately. He smiled like that proved something. The vet sent follow-up instructions directly to him. I was copied last. The message asked him to confirm compliance. He did within minutes. I didn't reply. One afternoon, I came home early and found the apartment empty. Her bed was gone. The bowl was gone. The hook by the door held only his leash now. My phone buzzed with a photo of her asleep in his place, chin on his foot. He said she was better off resting there until evening. I waited. When he brought her back, she walked past me first and sat by his leg. He unclipped the leash slowly, made her wait, then released her with a small nod. Only then did she come to me. He said it was good progress. That night, he slept lightly and rose at the smallest sound she made. He took her out before I moved. When I came to the door, he was already locking it behind them. In the morning, the registry sent another update. Ownership confirmed. Emergency pickup location adjusted. It listed his address. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone while he filled her bowl and told me she hadn't liked breakfast yesterday. He said we'd need to be consistent. He said we. I nodded. The call came from animal control. They asked if I was the owner or the contact. I said owner. There was a pause. They asked if I was calling on behalf of him. They said they had her with them and that pickup arrangements were already in place. I asked where she was. They said she'd been found near the park, confused but unharmed. They said the primary owner had been notified and was on his way. They said everything was under control. I hung up and called him. It rang once and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. When I got home, the leash hook was empty. The bowls were gone. The blanket from her crate was folded on the chair, clean like it had been returned. There was a note on the counter. Short. Practical. He said she'd had a scare and that it was better if she stayed with him for a few days. He said routine was critical right now. He said he'd bring her back once she settled. He didn't say when. That evening, the apartment was too quiet. I sat on the floor where she usually slept and waited for the sound of her nails on the tile. Nothing came. A neighbor knocked to ask if everything was okay. She said she'd seen him earlier with her and assumed I knew. She said they looked calm together. I said yes. Later, my phone buzzed with a photo. She was curled up on his couch, wearing a new collar. The tag glinted when the flash hit it. I zoomed in without thinking. His number was engraved underneath her name. I didn't respond. Before bed, I opened the registry again. The status hadn't changed. Primary owner confirmed. Care location updated. Emergency contact verified. My name wasn't there at all now. I lay awake listening to the building settle and told myself this was temporary. I told myself she was safer. I told myself he knew what he was doing. In the morning, there was another message. He said she'd slept through the night. He said she'd eaten all her food. He said she seemed calmer already. He said it was working. I put the phone down and clipped the empty leash back onto the hook, straightening it so it hung evenly. The hook held nothing. She didn't come back. I learned because the registry sent a closure notice, thanking the primary owner for confirming permanent placement. It said no further updates were required. It said the record was complete. I walked to his place without calling first. The door was closed. The light inside was on. Through the window, I saw her bed by the radiator, the bowl in the corner, the leash hanging where he could reach it. I stood there long enough for her to appear, tail wagging once before she settled at his feet. He didn't look up. I left before he noticed me. At home, the hook by the door was still empty. I took it down and set it in the drawer with spare keys I didn't use anymore. The leash stayed folded on the shelf. Animal Control emailed later to confirm transfer documentation had been finalized. They thanked me for cooperating. They said stability mattered most for older dogs. I didn't reply. That night, the apartment stayed quiet. No pacing. No nails on tile. I filled the bowl out of habit and poured the water out again when I remembered. In the morning, a final message arrived from him. One line. He said she'd settled completely and that it was better not to confuse her now. I deleted it. I took the empty collar from the drawer and dropped it in the trash on my way out. It made a soft sound when it landed. Outside, people walked their dogs past me, leashes loose, names called easily. I stepped aside and let them pass. The space at my heels stayed empty. Nothing followed,